Hello friends, this is Jim with Science Talk. Okay, now the assessments on 2018. 2018 will show record carbon emissions. Although investment in renewable energy is rising, the world is still warming dangerously fast. This comes back to that thermal inertia I have discussed with you folks numerous times before. There's enough thermal inertia in the system to keep things going. Or going in the sense of warming up continually. For the second year running, the world will have basically a dubious achievement to claim by the end of this year: record carbon emissions. Even before, as this year comes to a close, even beforehand, scientists behind those who actually measure the amount of CO2 being emitted, part of the global carbon budget, warned that emissions from coal, oil, and gas will have dumped a record 37 billion, with a B, tons of CO2 equivalent. Okay. This is a way of comparing the emissions from various greenhouse gases based on the global warming potential. This is 2.7% more than last year, which also showed an increase. Human destruction of the world's forests will add another 4 billion tons in the same 12 months. In the commentary in Nature, the journal Nature, the second set of scientists warns that time is running out. At the present rate of fossil fuel use, the world is set to breach the 1.5 C target by 2030 rather than 2040 everybody had assumed. That is being generous. We're already at 1.3. We're going to blow past 1.5 and probably do so before 2030. Why? Because rising emissions. Rising emissions, declining air pollution, and natural climate cycles working together will make climate change more fast and furious than expected. There are hopeful signs that renewable energy investment has begun to accelerate, and some nations have started to reduce fossil fuel emissions. So there are some positives there. But when you look at the raw data, when you look at how much has actually been released, the trend is increasing, which means that more warming will be taking place because we put more of the GHGs into the atmosphere. The confirmation of yet another record year for fossil fuel combustion after 3 consecutive years, 2014 to 2016, in which fossil fuel use seemed to have peaked and might have started to decrease, suggests that even those nations most concerned about climate change are not doing enough. Well, here's the thing. Population continues to increase. These people are going to require energy. So this increase in energy usage is probably due to energy demand increasing. More people require energy. They have to get it somehow. Right now, they're going to get it from burning fossil fuels. The biggest emitters are China, the US, India, Russia, Japan, Germany, Saudi Arabia, South Korea, and Canada. Taken as a collective, the European Union moves India out of third place. So if we take the EU as a collective, then it'll be China, US, EU, then India. If the UK, a self-proclaimed climate progressive country, could celebrate the exploitation of a new North Sea oil field while at the same time exploring for shale gas and expanding its largest airport, it should be no surprise that global emissions were rising. This is a statement from Kevin Anderson, who is a professor of energy and climate change at the Tyndall Center at the University of Manchester in the UK. If the climate-aware EU is planning new pan-Europe pipeline to lock in high-carbon gas for decades to come, is it any surprise global emissions are rising? That's a rhetorical question, I take it. If evergreen Sweden, currently without any major gas infrastructure, is enthusiastically building a new gas terminal in Gothenburg, is it any surprise emissions are rising? No. U.S. is continuing increasing the fracking industry and production, you know, extracting huge amounts of fossil fuels. So it's almost like this, you know, they're saying one thing and doing another. Publication of the Global Carbon Project Review for 2018 is timed to focus minds in, well, what just took place in Poland, Katowice, and as a reminder of how much has yet to be done to obtain climate change. To mention global warming to the Paris Agreement goal of 1.5 C, CO2 emissions would need to decline by 50% by 2030 and reach zero around 2050, said Corinne Leclerc, who directs the Tyndall Center for Climate Change at the University of East Anglia in the UK. Now, I mentioned these values and Dr. Leclerc's statements in a previous video where she works at the University of East Anglia, UEA, so you can check out that video. Dr. Leclerc says we are a long way from this and much more needs to be done because if countries stick to commitments they've already made, we are on track to see 3 degrees C of global warming. This year we have seen how climate change can already amplify the impact of heat waves worldwide. The California wildfires are just a snapshot of the growing impacts we face if we don't drive emissions down rapidly. Now, renewable energy is growing, so there is that positive to report to you. The data in the report published in one version in Environmental Research Letters and in more detail in the journal Earth System Science Data. So basically, what they're saying is the Environmental Research Letters publication is like a condensed version, kind of a summary. Whereas looking at the information in more detail, more data analysis is found in the Earth System Science Data. Also point to acceleration towards renewable sources of energy. There's a term to describe this process. It's called decarbonization. You might want to remember that. We want to increase decarbonization while we decrease global emissions, burning of fossil fuels and global emissions of greenhouse gases. So we want to decarbonize. Coal consumption in Canada and the U.S. had dropped 40% since 2005. Christiana Figueres, who in 2015 as the UN climate chief presided over the Paris Agreement, she argues in another commentary in Nature that these are signs of promise. However, since the Trump administration has come into power, coal emissions are back up and coal production is back up. So that's a negation of this gain, and that is offsetting any use of green technology, adding to the more increase of carbon from burning fossil fuels. Dr. Figueres continues on saying thousands of businesses in 120 countries have signed up to the Paris goal. Of course, Trump pulled out of it, which could bring 26 trillion with a T dollars in economic benefits, including 65 million new jobs in what she called the booming low carbon economy. We have already achieved things that seemed unimaginable just a decade ago. She continues, exponential progress in key solutions is happening and on track to displace fossil fuel. Renewable energy costs have dropped by 80% in a decade. One of the biggest barriers is the cost. You know, you want to put solar panels on your roof. Oh, do you have $34,000 in your back pocket to spend on such a system? You know, before government subsidies and so on and so forth. Well, now these costs are coming down, making it more accessible, more affordable for people to utilize. And today, over half of all new energy generation capacity is renewable. Before 2015, many people thought the Paris Agreement was impossible. Yet thousands of people and institutions made the shift from impossible to unstoppable. that might be a little looking through the rose-tinted glasses there, I'm sorry to say. The data is indicating not quite. David Ray, professor of carbon management at the University of Edinburgh in the UK, he warned that the accounting within the balance sheet for the carbon budget 2018 was robust. Translation: as I reported to you at the outset of this video, more carbon is being put into the atmosphere. Its message is more brutal than ever. We are in the red and still heading deeper. This is Professor Ray. This cannot continue. It must not. To give us a chance of meeting the Paris climate goals, emissions need to fall, and fast. We knew this in 2015. We know it now, and yet they still rise. So the translation, the snapshot statement from all of this is that despite the increased use of renewable energy technology, CO2 burning and CO2 levels in the atmosphere continue to increase. That's the summation. So we're really not addressing the issue, well, only superfluously, just on the surface. Not a real comprehensive policy. That's what's needed. A new comprehensive policy. And the politicians simply are just not doing it. They're failing us. So, basically things are continuing to get bad. That's what it comes down to. And it's going to add to the thermal inertia and couple what I've discussed with you guys before about increasing population, putting increased demand for energy, food, and so on increased pressure on the resources, on finite resources, on a finite land area of this planet. This cannot continue, and something will give, and soon. It's probably coming a lot sooner than we know. So, sorry that this is kind of a dire message, but that's what the data is telling us, and go by the data and the analysis. And only by acknowledging how bad things are, which the scientists have done, and then we need the politicians to also not just give lip service, but to actually become aggressive with pursuing green technology. Yes, I discussed all the issues, that in trying to implement green technology that presents, you have to use fossil fuels to get the materials to build the equipment, etc. That's still going to be there, but it's either that or continue burning fossil fuels, and we know what that's going to do. So there's no easy solutions, but that does not mean you don't do anything. We have to do something. The time was yesterday, last year, to do something. Last decade. We can't keep putting this off any further. Thank you for your time. Talk soon. Hey folks, this is Jim here reminding you to subscribe to this channel, to share my videos, tell others of the work that I do here. I also ask that if you are not already a patron at Patreon, to please consider becoming a patron at Patreon. You can find the information in the description box below the video. I'm asking you to help support the work that I do. I do not take any money from corporations or from any other sources, so the information I share with you is the actual science as it comes out of the peer-reviewed journals. So there is no BS, there's no propaganda, there's no agenda. It's just I present the science and I explain to you what it means, or at least my interpretations of it, based on my own experience as a scientist. I want this channel to grow. I consider, while I discuss many different topics here, you notice I do focus a lot on climate issues. I consider climate change to be the most pressing issue facing humanity today. Thus, I consider it important to disseminate this information to a wider and wider, more and more people. And I need your help to do this. So, yes, please subscribe. Please tell others of the work that I do here. Please share my videos on social media platforms, with your social media groups, what have you. We need to get this information out there. So for those of you who are supporting me on Patreon, I thank you greatly for your support and continued support. It does mean a lot to me. So together we can get this information to more and more people. Thank you. Thank you for your support.